Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to our today's skill building session. Elon Musk said it is possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. We think medicine is making it possible in today's time. Thus, we begin by thanking you all for deciding to study medicine. Starting at a medical school is like eating an elephant. You just have to do it one bite at a time. Let us understand these bits and bytes from Henah Vadher, Recruitment Manager, North and West India at St. George's University. She has been operating in the UK higher education industry for over 10 years in various roles, advising and guiding students towards their career aspirations and ambitions. Henah, along with one of the alumni of St. George's University, Dr. Ninad Desai, originally from India and now a resident physician at Wyckoff Heights Medical Center in New York, will be advising on pursuing medical studies internationally to become a globally recognized doctor. St. George's University is a top international medical school which was established in 1976 and is proud to have an international network of 18,000 MD graduates in the US and around the world, including a large community of alumni from India. I now request Henah and Dr. Ninad to start the session. Over to you both.
Thank you very much. Hi, Ninad. Thank you so much for this.
Of course.
I know it's very early over there in the US, about 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I'm here in the UK and it's 10 o'clock in the morning, so we're all on different time zones. Welcome to this session. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to be asking Ninad some questions about medical school, and we hope you enjoy this session. So without further ado, Ninad, please can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ninad. I have a very long story, but in the interest of time, just to keep it brief and to the point, I grew up in India, moved to the States when I was just about to turn 15, and did my undergraduate studies here, and then went to medical school in Grenada at St. George's University School of Medicine. And now I'm an emergency medicine resident in Brooklyn, New York. And I'm about to enter my third year of residency, which is the final year of residency in just about a month and a half's time. So I'm very excited to finish residency, but also very nervous that I'm going to be an attending physician out there in the real world. And I'm very excited for it, but equally nervous at the same time.
Well, Ninad, I've spoken to you a few times now over the past couple of years, and you're doing an absolute ace job. So we wouldn't think that you're nervous at all.
Thank you.
As you mentioned, you are practicing in the US. What led you as an aspiring medic living in India to this decision? You know, you said you moved at 15, but did you always want to be a medic?
No. So kind of my long-term goals were unclear. I know that I moved to the States with my family for a better education opportunities, but I never knew what I really wanted to pursue. So I actually started undergraduate university thinking that I was going to do a form of engineering. I was a physics major back in undergrad, and so I thought mechanical or computer or electrical, something or another, because the science always fascinated me. But as I progressed through undergrad, and I also used to work with autistic adolescents at that time, and I realized that the most important component for me for the rest of my career would be working with people and for people. So in my limited experience pursuing internships and talking to people and hoping for a career in engineering, I kind of realized that that lifestyle was not for me. I know it's a great lifestyle for some people, kind of office work, 9 to 5 in front of a computer. In a sense, low stakes, and it just wasn't doing it for me. And at the same time, when I used to work with autistic adolescents, I realized that I gained the most joy in serving people, not just working with people, but for people. And so I decided medical school, as opposed to any other career in medicine, because I still was interested in the science, and a lot of physics crosses over to medicine, believe it or not. And that's what led me to pursue medicine. And why in the States specifically? Because this is the best place to train for medicine. It's a top research, cutting edge medicine, and all sorts of just resources that are at the forefront of medicine. And so this is the place I wanted to train and practice in the future. But also training here gives me the tools to be able to practice anywhere else in the world. And that's something that I'm still considering. And even if I end up making a life for myself in the States, I still want to have the opportunity to go elsewhere and do volunteer work, philanthropic work, and whatever. And I want those options to be open for me. And so that's really why I chose to pursue training in the States.
Amazing. And you said a little bit about how you did it, the 9-to-5 life wasn't for you. And today's like a perfect example where you're up at 5 o'clock in the morning because you're going to be starting your shift at 6.
Right. And I'm regretting it a little bit.
Oh, brilliant. So my next question is about terminology, and there's so much medical terminology that we come across, and of course we are used to this because we're in the industry. I'm working for a medical school and you're practicing physician, but for somebody who is looking to go to medical school, medical terminology can be a little bit sort of nerve-wracking as such. And one abbreviation that pops up so frequently is USMLE. What is this, and can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, of course. So when I pivoted to medicine, I was lucky enough to be at a university that had its own medical school and its own hospital and had an entire school of medicine and health sciences in undergrad. And so I was exposed enough to terminology, but I also took a class called Medical Humanities and Terminology. And so I learned a lot about medicine through my undergrad and through talking to folks. But again, no classes teach you what USMLE is and what MCAT is and these and this and that. And so for me, it was a process that I learned just along the way. So USMLE stands for the United States Medical Licensing Exam. And there's 3 steps to the exam. So step 1, step 2, and step 3. And for me, the best way to understand what each of the step exam tests and contains is kind of like a very generalized pathway, such as the following. So step 1 is essentially, what is the disease? Step 2 is, how do you diagnose the disease and what kind of complications that come with it and what predisposes you to disease? And step 3 is, how do you manage this disease long term and what kind of things can you do to avoid certain diseases in the long term, and how to practice independently as a physician. So steps 1 and 2 are taken during medical school. During step 1 is after the first 2 years, and step 2 is during the 3rd/start of the 4th year. And then most folks take step 3 during the 1st or 2nd year of residency, because a lot of what's tested on the step 3 is clinical based practicing medicine. And so a lot of these things are hard to learn outside of like a hospital, but many people do it, and many people are capable of doing very, very well on it, because just like any other standardized exam, there's a blueprint to this exam. And so that's really the best way to put it together. So I hope that clarified things and made sense.
Yeah, amazing. So step 1 and step 2 you would do at medical school, and then the step 3 you would do once you're in your residency.
Right. So step 3 is not required to apply for or get into residencies, but a lot of people, when they, so not a lot, but there's quite a few people who take a different path to residency. So some folks will take an extra year off to do research, or some folks who may not match into residency the very first go also take it before residency. And I know some people who took it during the 4th year of medical school, just because they didn't want to study for another standardized exam in residency. So there's very different ways of doing it. And so step 3 is kind of the least or the lowest stakes of the 3-step exams.
Brilliant, thank you. And is there, like at medical school, is there a department or a team that kind of helps you through this process and helps you kind of map out, when would be a good time for you to take the step 3 rather than you making that decision yourself?
So from what I remember and from all the research that I did, a lot of folks advise that depending on what kind of residency you go into or what kind of specialty you get into, you take the exam at a certain time. So I'm in emergency medicine, and so emergency medicine and family medicine are similar in the sense that we are expected to know a little bit about all sorts of diseases and all sorts of patient populations. So I'm expected to know all emergencies related to OBGYN, to pediatrics, to psychiatry, to medicine, to surgery, but I'm not the specialist in any of those fields, right? So I was advised to take the exam whenever, really, because I'm always going to be learning about everything. And step 3 is just that. It's a little bit of everything, as opposed to subspecialties. So I'll have colleagues that have matched into psychiatry or general surgery or pediatrics or OBGYN who are so focused on these specialties during their residency training and the board exams for those specialties that they may find it a little bit challenging to kind of revisit everything that's on the USMLE Step 3. So during medical school, the Department of Educational Services at SGU, as well as my colleagues, alumni at SGU, even my co-residents advised me that, hey, you can take this exam whenever you want, but the sooner the better, because like I alluded to earlier, it's a standardized exam. And so, there's really not a lot that they test on, but there's some very, very specific things that they will always test on. And those things you're not always exposed to in the clinical world when you're doing residency. So depending on what specialty you go into, you can take the exam based on, that kind of your comfort level.
Yeah, thank you. And at St. George's University, you the last 2 years of the program are the clinical rotations. And can you tell me a little bit about your clinical rotations experience? And also, do all medical schools offer this? And how important do you feel clinical rotations is?
Okay, so to practice in the United States, you have to do, I believe it's 80 weeks of clinical rotations. Every medical school offers this, but that does not mean all the clinical rotations are great. So in Brooklyn, and then I did a few rotations in New Jersey, which is a neighboring state, only because I wanted to branch out my medical education. So clinical rotations is a very, very unique opportunity because depending on where you do your rotations, you're exposed to certain types of because Queens is known as the melting pot of the entire United States. And this is where you have people from all races, religions, all sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds, all sorts of different disease processes that you might not see elsewhere. And so I did my clinical rotations at Elmhurst Hospital, which is a New York City health and hospital. And it's also a St. George's official affiliate or whatever. There's so many of them throughout the states, but that's one of their New York City hospitals. And I did my clinical rotations in most of my core rotations there. So pediatrics I did there, OBGYN I did there, surgery I did there, internal medicine as well, and psychiatry was there as well. So the only thing I didn't do there was emergency medicine because they didn't have that clinical rotation. And not every hospital will have every rotation, but emergency medicine was not at that time a core rotation. So core rotations are 6 generalized specialties that every med school student has to go through, whether they go to a US med school, a Caribbean medical school, or any medical school. It's part of the requirements to be a practicing physician in the US. And so I did all of my cores at Elmhurst and then some of my specialized rotations there. And then my emergency medicine rotations I did in New Jersey. So these clinical rotations are just that. It's everything that you learn during the first 2 years of medical school in a textbook, in a classroom, in a controlled simulation setting. Now you're seeing actual patients and now you're exposed to actual somewhat increased stakes of medicine. As a medical student, you still don't have a lot of responsibility, but depending on the trust that you build, depending on the amount of work that you put in with your residents and your attending physicians, you can gain responsibility, and you can do some meaningful, impactful work in patient care while learning what patient care is and while learning the breadth of medicine, which does not just include medicine itself or the science behind it, but also the social aspect of medicine and kind of the financial aspect of medicine and how it affects your patients. So that's essentially what clinical rotations are. And my clinical experiences through St. George's University were excellent, and I could not have asked for more.
Amazing. Really good to hear.
Sure.
And so as a medical student throughout your time at, medical school, what support do you feel is imperative and that you really do need it, any medical student would need?
So like I said earlier, I was a physics major. So when I pivoted to medicine, I don't have a lot of immediate family members who are in medicine, but there are enough kind of long distance relatives who are in medicine, but also some of my friends who are in medicine. And I knew not a lot, but a good chunk of people, both from my high school as well as my undergrad university, that went to St. George's University. And they pointed out to me immediately what resources I needed to look out for. And all of those resources St. George's provided for me. So some of the things I didn't even know I needed it until I needed it. And then St. George's was always available. So one of the things that I alluded to earlier is something called the Department of Educational Services. So the DES was one of the foremost important resources for me. And so essentially what the DES does is not only does it support you in your academics, but it also gives you access to your peers who've done quite well in courses in med school, and they tutor you. So DES organizes tutoring sessions that are once a week, one hour each throughout the week, and you can sign up for as many of those as you like in order to kind of supplement your education outside of the lectures and outside of the small group discussions. DES also has these education advisors who will sit down with you, and based on how you study and what you study will help you customize your studying methods so that you can excel in school. So for me, I've always noticed that I'm not very good at just reading and internalizing things. I need concrete examples, and I need to be able to see different scenarios and able to be ordered to absorb information and then apply it in various scenarios. And so the DES, the department, one of the advisors that I sat down with, recognized that through the way that I told her that I studied, and then advised me to just learn through doing practice questions, and then taking those practice questions and the incorrect answers and making them into correct answers, as opposed to a friend of mine from med school. This is the kind of a student who just open a textbook, a 700-page tome, and just learn it front to back. And so him and I learned in very different ways. And DES is a department that recognizes that and tailors education, or rather study methods based on each individual student. So DES was one of them. Another is something called the Office of Career Guidance. And that remains probably one of the most important departments that I can think of. And the reason for that is pursuing medicine in United States is a very, 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 very complex kind of pathway. And the reason for that is not only do you have to navigate USMLE Step 1 and Step 2 and Step 3, but you also have to know what kind of letters of recommendations to get, how to tailor your personal statement, how to tailor your CV in order to maximize your chance at matching one of these residencies. And the residencies are such a prestigious thing, whether you go to the big named universities, that have been around for centuries and have their own hospitals, or you go to a smaller community hospital like mine, that has its own residency program. These are all very prestigious spots and everyone wants them. And so OCG was one of the most important resources for me, in the sense that they helped me tailor my application in such a way that I would maximize my chances at getting into residency. So that's another resource. And then a few other resources are just inherent to any medical school, and the quality of those resources depends on the medical school itself. And so those would be your lecturers and your advisors, both during basic sciences years, which are the first 2 years, and the clinical sciences years, which is when you're in the United States doing clinical rotations. Other things are part of any education. So things like UWorld, which is this Q bank that helps you prepare for USMLE, and so on and so forth. So I hope that that kind of, answers that question adequately.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so how did you make the decision to know where to study medicine? How did you come about yours? Because you said that you came to St. George's University. How did you come to that decision?
Right. So that's a very, very, very important question, and probably one of those things where I put in a lot of thought into it when applying to medical schools, but the story is not as cool as I make it sound. So when I was in Stony Brook University, which is where I did my undergrad, and I was a physics major, my grades were not the best, and that's for various reasons. But the foremost reason would probably be, and I like to describe myself as a late bloomer. When I got to undergrad university, I wasn't, like I alluded to earlier, I wasn't sure exactly what kind of career that I wanted to pursue. But I was pre-med at that time. Most people at Stony Brook are pre-med, and pre-med is not a major. It's just one of those things that you add to your curriculum and to your major, so that you can pursue a career in medical sciences or health sciences. And with pre-med, you can go on to PA school or nursing school or medical school or whatever it is that you want to do. But through my time, I ended up being a physics major, and my grades in undergrad for physics were good enough to get a job or get into engineering school for physics. But medical schools are extremely competitive, and they require students with grade point averages that are 90 percentile or above. And, I didn't have those scores, but I knew that I was capable. So when I did switch over to pursuing medicine full time instead of graduating undergrad university in 4 years, as most people would. During my third year, I decided to pick up biology as a second major. And I also started studying for the MCAT at the time. So the MCAT is the Medical College Aptitude Test. I think that's what it stands for, but it's essentially an entrance exam that everyone in the US has to take in order to get into medical school. And so I performed quite well on the MCAT exam, and that reinforced for me personally that I was capable of excelling in medical school. And so I applied to a few medical schools in the US. The application process itself is extremely expensive. And so I applied to a few medical schools in the US. I was rejected, but I knew that the only thing I wanted to do was medicine and to become a doctor. And so, like I alluded to earlier, people from my high school and undergrad had gone to St. George's University. And so I had heard of St. George's University, and I knew that it had a great reputation back in 2015 when I applied. I knew that they'd been around for 40 plus years, something like that. And that to me is important. Any good institution has a legacy and has a lot of alumni and has a lot of practicing graduated physicians. And so St. George's was it for me. I didn't look into any other medical schools because at that time I also had financial constraints. And so I knew I would need loans to finance my education. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that wherever I went to medical school just gave me an opportunity to succeed. And I knew that St. George's would. So I did my research as to what SGU was, what kind of opportunities I had, where I would be able to do clinical rotations, where, what their rate of USMLE passing was, what their rate of matching into residency was, what kind of residencies would I match into. And before I went to medical school, I just wanted to be a pediatrician, and I wanted to work with children and adolescents because that's the genesis of my pathway into medicine and my career in medicine. But of course that pivoted once I got into clinical rotations. So either way, even though I pivoted and I no longer wanted to be a pediatrician, I wanted to be an emergency medicine physician, I had that opportunity through St. George's, and I was able to pivot and I was able to pursue and get into this residency. So that's really how I got to to St. George's and the decision I made to go to St. George's.
Brilliant. And how did you find the application process? You said it's very difficult, with universities in the US. Right. Applying to St. George's, what was the process and how did you find that?
So the process to apply to St. George's was quite straightforward. At that time, so there are two types of medical degrees that you can pursue in the US. And so one is an MD and the other is DO, which is lesser known globally, but it's very well recognized in the States. DO just stands for Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine. But I kind of, I applied to MD schools, and there's a unified application process called the I forget, something like AACOM or something or another, and it's just a unified application process. So you put in all of your stuff there, and then this one application goes to all these USMD schools. And then the only thing that differs is each medical school may have their own sets of questions that they ask in personal statements and so on and so forth. But SGU took that application, and then they also had their personalized questions, and that's all I had to do was answer that on the side. And the application process was quite simple for me, where once I decided that I wanted to go to St. George's, I just applied, and that was it. It wasn't that difficult at all. And any questions that I had, it was one phone call away, one email away, and that's it.
Excellent, brilliant. So, you went from India to US, and then you came to St. George's University at the Grenada campus, and now you're practicing in the US. You alluded to this a little bit earlier about, being able to practice in different parts of the globe. And how important is it to you as a medic to know about the recognition of medical degrees around the world?
For me, it's kind of not the most important thing, but it is an option that I want to have. And so the most important thing about going to Grenada for me is not the recognition as much as the exposure. So being able to go to St. George's and learn some clinical medicine in Grenada anyway, because during this last half of the second year of med school in Grenada, we would do clinical rotations 1 day a week at the Grenada General Hospital, and we would rotate with the surgeon there or the internal medicine doctor there, and we would start to get exposed to clinical medicine. I was also part of some student organizations whereby we would organize health fairs for the general population of Grenada and provide screening services. And so for me, these things gave me exposure to medicine. And while the laws and the regulations of medicine in different countries is unique to each country, the people and the pathology are still the same. And that was important to me because going to Grenada, I learned that, a disease is disease. And when a person is ill, a person is ill. It doesn't matter what laws or regulations. So I didn't care as much about knowing that St. George's would be recognized worldwide, but I was happy that it was, because it's, at the end of the day, you're going to medical school in Grenada, but you're doing clinical rotations in the States so that you can get a residency in the States. And that residency board certification from the States is incredibly important because it's recognized worldwide. And tomorrow morning, if I decide to move to Europe or back to India or wherever, I have that opportunity to go practice medicine there because I'm US board certified. And then I would just have to take the board certifications exams wherever I move to, but it shouldn't be that difficult a transition.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. That's brilliant. So from your perspective, Ninad, what are the three main questions that you would ask a medical school if you were applying now and if you were in the same boat as our viewers right now?
Of course. So the number one question would be, will I get a residency placement? Because 4 years of medical school is, to put it lightly, exhausting. It's not just exhausting physically or emotionally, but it can also be financially challenging because, like with any professional school education, whether that's law school, dental school, going to nursing school, these are all expensive kind of ventures. But if I know that I have a very, very high probability of getting into medical school, residency, and that probability can only be enhanced by my hard work and the resources through medical school, then I know that that financial investment would be, uh, and the emotional investment and the physical investment would be worth it. Because at the end of the day, it's just an investment in myself and my future and my ability to do things that give me happiness and give me a sense of fulfillment. And so that has to be the number one question, right? But there's other.
Sorry,
Um,
before you go on to the second and third, it's just something that you said in the first, the first thing that you would ask about residencies, and you said, it is very exhausting mentally, and it is very full on and intense, as we know. As a medical student, what did you do to kind of distress yourself whilst being at medical school? Is a question that I really wanted to ask.
all right, so that's a great question. And so Grenada, this is the most unique thing about going to Grenada to study medicine, is that it's on this gorgeous island with some of the most beautiful beaches that I've ever been to, and the weather is just fantastic. And so de-stressing was easy. I was out and about playing basketball, or would go to the beaches with my friends, or even just sit by the water and study there. And so that kind of helped me de-stress a lot. But the other things were joining various student organizations, because not only did that give me a chance to network with my future colleagues and collaborate with them, it also gave me an outlet to express myself and to be able to do things that I was interested in. So one of the things that I alluded to earlier, I was part of this student organization called AMSA, which is AMSA, American Medical Students Association. And there's equivalent organizations that gave me an opportunity to volunteer and give back my time to the citizens of Grenada, and that helped me de-stress. I was also part of something called ICSA, which is the Indian Cultural Students Organization, and or association rather, and they hosted so many events throughout my time in Grenada, whether that's a holy event or a Diwali dinner or these cultural shows where people can express their culture through dance, song, instruments, and those were fantastic events that helped me de-stress and get to meet new people. So medical school becomes quite challenging, but there's many, many ways to de-stress. I also have lost close to 70 or 80 pounds while I was in Grenada, and that's through just working out and meeting like-minded people who de-stressed in healthy ways by, going to the gym or playing different various sports. And so those are some of the ways that I was able to de-stress.
Amazing. And you said a little bit about the celebrations like Holi and Diwali. So you always felt that a little bit of your culture, regardless of being in Grenada, was with you, which is amazing. And it's nice to
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. I need that. I crave that, right? We all crave varying levels of, I guess, the idea of a home, because that's what provides us comfort, right, in times of stress. So, one of the few things that I didn't anticipate before going to medical school was how homesick I would be, especially going, from New York to Grenada is approximately 3,000 miles. And so I didn't anticipate how homesick I was going to be, but it felt so good to know that there are these very student organizations that propagate my culture and make me feel at home and make me feel comfortable so that I can focus on and excel at studies. And it wasn't just the Indian Students Cultural Association, right? They also have cultural associations based on religion. So there was a Christian Students Association, and they would have their prayers and mass every Sunday, and a Muslim Students Association, and the Hindu Students Association, and they would do, I don't know if, I never went, but I know that they did kirtans and bhajans and got together and did different sorts of prayers, and that's cool. And so there's something for everyone, and that kind of feeling of home and culture brings on comfort so that we can excel at medicine and pursuing this exhausting career.
Amazing. I'll let you come in with the next two questions that you've asked as a medical student.
Sure. So just kind of go back to it. The first one is, am I going to get into residency? And then the second one is related to that, and that's where am I going to be able to get into residency? So that's also equally important, because even though residency is very, very prestigious, just getting a residency spot may not be enough sometimes. And what's important is where you get into residency. So I'm not talking about, you know, very advanced places. I'm not talking about places with lots of resources, but I'm talking about, are you going to be able to get into residency in New York City or in California or in Florida? And that's important because, again, residency is extremely exhausting. And so are you going to be in a place where you're comfortable and have support enough to excel in medicine? And so for me, emergency medicine, getting in New York was really important. And the reason for that is not only do I have family nearby, but also because the way that it was always expressed to me is that if you can train for and practice emergency medicine successfully in New York City, you can practice it anywhere in the world. And the reason for that is, like I alluded to earlier, the varying amounts of pathology, patient population, the varying resources that any given number is exposed to, it's highly variable in New York. And so you can have someone who's incredibly insightful of their own body and of their own disease process that's going on. And then there's someone who's never heard of anything, suffering from a life-threatening disease. And the opportunity to work with both kind of each end of the spectrum was really important to me. And so that matters. But it also matters as to, where you get into residency, because certain places are better equipped to train you at a higher level for certain specialties as opposed to other specialties. So that would be my number two thing, which is, am I going to be able to get into certain places for residency? And that's really important. And then the last thing was, and we talked about this at length, was, am I going to be prepared for residency? Is this med school going to help me prepare for not just USMLE step 1 and step 2, but is it going to help me get into residency? Is it going to help me prepare my application to residency? Is it going to help me find clinical rotations? Is it going to help me, further my, or rather decrease my administrative, so as to say, stress, so that I can focus on medicine? And for me, I learned that St. George's was answered all of those questions. All of my clinical rotations during my third year were scheduled for me, and they were all scheduled in the same place. And all I had to do was show up and learn and be eager and participate and be a team member, as opposed to going from hospital to hospital to hospital, learning a new system every day, or rather every rotation. And so that was very important for me, because I knew that when I was at Elmhurst Hospital and I did all of my core rotations there, I already knew where the operating rooms were, and where the pediatric floor was, and where the internal medicine floors were, and what kind of people worked where, so that I could be a good team member and take care of or help complete these like different tasks in order to further patient care. And that was really important to me. That's not something that I realized was going to be important to me, but now that, that's the question, right? It's, if I'm applying to medical school now, what are the questions I'm asking? And so those things turn out to be way more important than other things. So that's kind of the top 3 questions that I would ask.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Ninad. It's been great to have you on here and, talk to me and speak, tell us about your journey. Is there anything else that you want to say to our viewers?
Yes and no, only because, we can talk about med school at length for hours and hours, but really all that comes down to is, and I say this every single time to every single person who thinks about pursuing medicine, and it's very simple. It's that if you can't see yourself be anything other than a physician, and you're considering St. George's and it's an option, just go, because all the tools you need to succeed are here. It's just what you do with it. And if you're equally motivated as I was, and I continue to be, and that's all you plan to do, then just get your journey started. I took a bit of a circuitous path, and I wish I hadn't. I wish I had just started medical school right away, because it's a very, very, very long path. So the longer you delay, the further back you are in terms of medical knowledge, because it's evolving at all times. So in a way, just get started, right? So.
Oh, thank you, Henah. As always, so aspiring and inspiring. Thank you for joining me. And yeah, I will end the session here. Thank you.
Of course.
Bye.
Take care.